Hello everybody. My setup to begin 2024 is in many ways inspired by 3 videos I saw in 2023. So I'll talk about those 3 videos and then I'll show how my performance rig here is inspired by them. The Oxi One wrote those chords you just heard. The Oxi One wrote the bass line too, and I did not transpose that bass line. The Oxi One has harmonically related the bass line to the chords and follows them when the chords change. And I was using the scatter effect on the MC707 that will do any DJ effect you've ever heard, from tape stop to filtering to stutter. Even an Aphex Twin bouncing ball it will do, but admittedly the factory scatter patches are really bad, and I don't think people realize how great it is when you just edit it a little bit. And it can be quantized to start on the One. And that's what I showed in my last video, showing how to make the tape stop effect and the Aphex Twin bouncing ball effect using scatter. So check out my last video for that. So one thing I saw this year was the Nopia. That Nopia video got 5 million views, and I'm not sure why it went so viral. But that concept that it has of the bass line following the chords and the arpeggio following the chords is something I see a little bit of in the Oxi One. And as I talk about these things in these videos that inspired me, I'll do a little bit of what I saw on my setup here. So I've put a little bass pattern here just with the root note, and this is an electric bass preset of the MC707. Sounds a little like what they're using in the Nopia. And when I start playing chords, the bass is going to follow the chord. So I made a little 4-note arpeggio here, just using 4 steps of the sequencer. And when I start playing the chord, this will also follow the chord. One of the things that I have here with my setup that the Nopia doesn't have is that these pads here on the MC707 are 4 levels of velocity. So I can activate 4 different instruments depending on how hard I hit these pads. Now I made a little bass sound that has a slap bass when I hit hard on it. And I'll show you how to do that on the MC707, how to make that sound in a second. But so I could do something like this, compared to that Nopia video. But the real beauty that you get into in doing something like that is the ability to access those velocity layers really quickly on the One. So I'll show you what I mean. Go to that bass track there. Now if I want to quickly access that slap bass, all I got to do is just click on this encoder here, velocity, and I could just do that. Now there's ways to get very sophisticated if you had 4 layers and you wanted to do a lot of stuff, and that would be with the mod. So this is the mod layer, and it can run at different speeds and be different lengths. It can be its own length and everything. So let's say I wanted that slap bass to happen every 4th time. I can come in here and hit shift and click there and change the division. You do a little clock division on the mod layer so that the mod layer is 1/4 the speed. And then when it gets to here, it'll do that velocity. So let's check that out. It's 1 time through, 2 times, 3. So you could do that type of thing. And you can imagine if you made a patch with 4 layers of velocity, what you could do. A lot of crazy things, because then you could do something like that. And you'd be accessing different things on the pads. You could have 4 stickings of a snare if you wanted to get really sophisticated with your drums or something like that. So for you fans of the 707, I'll quickly show how to create that pad that has a regular bass at a normal velocity and then goes into the slap bass if you tap the pad a little harder. First of all, you hit sound and you get that preset, one of these basses that you like, and you could use like a pick bass. Then you go into shift sound, and this is where you turn it into this pad that will have the slap bass when you hit it hard. With Roland's bass, there's the first 3 oscillators they had used for the bass sounds. And then the last one, they didn't have a sound on it. So it was like that. It was off. So I turned that on to PCM and chose the internal sound from Bank A, the slap bass. Step 2, you'll go up here to Structure, hit Enter, and then go over to Partial Range tab. And this is where you'll set it up. So the 3 oscillators Roland already had for the standard bass sound. Velocity range upper of partial 1, which is right there. It says PMT1. That's just oscillator 1. Oscillator 2 and oscillator 3. And when I got to oscillator 4, I made the lower velocity range 100, the upper velocity range 127. So now when you hit the pad a little harder, you get the slap bass. So another video that inspired me in 2023 was the Lambda Polypulse. And it also took me back to an old video that Mylar Melodies had done on the Tip Top Trigger Riot. Same type of idea where you have these regular intervals on a timeline, and when you combine 2 of those together, you get a funky beat out of it. So I'll show you what I mean. So if you go back and watch Mylar Melodies video of the Trigger Riot, you kind of see this type of thing where he sets up a 4 on the floor beat by dialing in a 4 for the kick. So I'll do effectively that here. So I'll set this kick, this row is a kick. This is a multi-track sequencer, and each row is a different drum. So I've got 2 kicks, 2 snares, and 2 hi-hats there. So this is effectively dialing in a 4 on the Trigger Riot. And then for this first snare there, I will dial in an 8. Let's make that 8 long. And then for the hi-hat, I'll dial in a 2. And then I'll put the hi-hat in, I'll put the snare trigger in, the kick trigger in. And you're seeing it right there. Seeing that one go back and forth should be doing the hi-hat. Maybe there's no trigger in it. Okay. So kind of a standard 4 on the floor beat. So the cool part and the funky part is adding that next regularized or regular interval in. So I'll add a second kick in, and I'll hold down end here, but I'll make the end of this one, let's say 5, and throw that kick in there. And you get a much funkier pattern there. And then for the snare, second snare there, I will put a 7. I'll end it at 7, so it's looping every 7. Put a trigger in. Add a little bass to it. Let's let Oxi generate a couple of bass scenarios. So let me talk for a minute about why you would use the Oxi One with the MC707, because the MC707 has a fine sequencer in it. So reason number one, let's say we've got a drum track here, as I have right here, and you hit your kick and you put your 4 on the floor in there, and then you go to your snare and do something. See, you actually have 16 tracks in track 1 here. You've got a track for each of the drums. And the only way you can see anything about that track is by hitting on these drums, and you can see one at a time where your hits are. That's kind of typical for groove boxes and drum machines. But using the Oxi here on track 4, for instance, you can see every single track and where the triggers are for your drums. So with the MC707, you're looking at your drum track. It's kind of like looking through a keyhole almost. And you're just seeing what you see through the keyhole. Looking at the Oxi, you can have the bird's eye view of it and see everything that's going on. Secondly, it's cool that the 707 will record motion. So it records modulation, but you can't see a graph of that. You can't see it graphically. Now you can access like per step and find out, okay, I want to turn my filter on this step, I want it to be 50, and on this step, I want it to be 100, and that type of thing. So you can set it that way, but there's nowhere you can go to see your modulation graphically and make changes to it as you can on here, like with the mod lane, where you can put something in there and you'll have it graphically there to see where everything is. That one there. Tap velocity. This is the velocity for all the hits. The hits are represented, the triggers are represented in purple, and the gray is where there's no trigger. But just that quick, you can see velocity. And then the final one is, you can manipulate a lot of things live using the encoders here, which is very cool too, because you can tie it into the synths, and you can tie it into the over 80 effects and filters and various things, and it's all assignable. And you can change it on the fly fairly easily too, just by hitting knob assign, and boom, you got your 4 knobs there, and you can quickly start changing what those knobs are assigned to. But you are limited to 3, and you are limited to, when you record motion, you're limited to the motion of these 3 knobs. That's what it's recording. And if you want to record lots of different modulation and lots of different things going on and change things on the fly, I find it pretty easy to do with the graphical representations that you can see on the Oxi. And the final reason for me is if I want to tie in my Euro rack. I've got the CV and gate out, 8 CVs and 8 gates there, and I can tie in aspects of my Euro rack and then save it as a project. And so when I get to some other location and set up my Euro rack and my MC707 together, then I've got a project saved in here. Call it up, I also save things as templates. The final inspiring video of 2023 was on Liam Killen's channel, where he had on a guy that goes by the moniker Stereo Image, and they were talking about his setup, which I think is a brilliant setup for the type of techno music he's doing. And if you want a taste of his setup, you can find many of those features on the MC707. So let's take a look at it piece by piece. So at the heart of it there for his sound generation is the Electron Rhythm. And this can play samples, and it has analog drum sounds in it. Now the 707 is not an analog machine, it's digital. However, it does have a virtual analog synthesizer in it that can make drum sounds, and then those drum sounds can then be manipulated. Most of the time when I hear people using the rhythm, though, they're not manipulating the drum sounds at all. And a lot of times they play samples as well. So if you're not manipulating your samples, and if you're not manipulating your analog drum sounds, and you're just playing samples most of the time, you could get by with the 707. Now in his case, in Stereo Image case, he is manipulating the samples a bit. So he's got the fader Fox there with all of the encoders on it, and he has them set up in a way that you can do with the MC707. He says that he uses some of them for filter. He might use them for reverb send or delay send or things like that. And you've got 3 encoders per channel on the MC707 that are fully programmable. You can tie those into any one of the 80 onboard effects, or you can tie them to aspects of your sample or synthesizer, pitch, pan, all that type of stuff. And they're pretty easy to change on the fly by hitting the knob assign button. Then he's got the torso sequencer there. And this is where I use my Oxi instead of that. And he uses that to generate patterns and Euclidean patterns, which the Oxi One also does. Then he has the 1010 black box, which he said he uses to play longer samples or things like that. And of course, the MC707 has the looper track that you can use to play longer samples or whatever. And then he has an effects box there. He's using 2. And with the MC707, you have, like I said, over 80 effects that you can use. So you don't really need an effects box like that if you have the MC707. And he said for the future, what he's going to add to this setup here is another fader Fox, the one that has the sliding faders. And so the MC707 already has that. It has sliding faders on it already. So, you can get a little taste of what he's got going on there. If you don't want to have a table full of gear like that, you can get a little taste of it. Now, of course, his is very sophisticated, and he's also operating at another level than us normal people are. I think that Stereo Image and some of these guys, their IQ is just way off the chart. The way they come up with this stuff just on the fly, and the way they set this stuff up so brilliantly. And the same thing goes for Liam Killen. He's also a very smart guy. So this is what has inspired me during 2023. And now I've got my setup ready to go for 2024. And I'd like to know what you guys think about it and the setup that you have, and what if you've seen these videos that inspired me and what you thought about them. Please let me know in the comments, and I'll talk to you in the next video.